Well, hello YouTube, it's me Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Overly Sarcastic Productions reaction. So, we're here once again, history summarized, the fall of Babylon. Okay, so Babylon, again, when it comes to history, Babylon is not one of those subjects I know much about. I know, it's obviously an ancient civilization. It's playable in the game series Civilization. Other than that, the only thing of note that I really know of is like, that was pretty much it. I was going to say Sargon of Akkad, but no, that's not Babylon. At least I don't think it is. Give me a second. I gotta do some learning at the moment. Okay, so never mind. I think I'm in the 5-minute searching I did. I think I'm actually right that Sargon of Akkad is involved with Babylon, or was like one of their kings. Again, the only thing I really know about him is one, his name, and two, there's the YouTuber that uses his name or his title as his online handle. Other than that, so I don't want to waste too much more time in the intro to this video. So yes, original video is linked in the description. If you haven't seen it for some reason, corner tab will be linking to whatever my Let's Play of the day is. And yeah, let's get into this then, shall we?
I don't think we talk enough about the fall of Babylon.
The Tower of Babylon.
That's coming from someone who has literally never talked
yeah.
about the fall of Babylon. Yes, that sounds crazy, and yes, I have been losing my mind about this for 2 weeks straight, but hear me out. The Babylonian civilization literally invented trigonometry, wrote the star charts we still use, and was home to the most legendarily opulent architecture from the Bronze Age down through the Classical period.
And astrology, yeah, that's an unfortunate thing that we still keep around today. Oh yeah. I was right. The Tower of Babel, the architecture so fabulously extravagant that heaven itself had to intervene. Yeah, with the Tower of Babel, which is what made everybody start speaking different languages.
Babylon influenced every society in a 2,000-mile radius for hundreds of years and continued to shape Near Eastern culture in the millennia that followed, but Babylon itself lacks the dramatic denouement characteristic of so many neighboring societies. For all the impact it made when it was thriving, Babylon's downfall is fully absent from our popular conception, and when compared to their neighbors like Egypt, Rome, Phoenicia, and Persia, who all have cultural legacies reaching to the modern day, Babylon has a conspicuous lack of direct successor states. The original Bronze Age Babylonian Empire ran from the 19th to the 16th centuries BC, and then one full millennium later, the classical era Neo-Babylonian Empire ruled for just shy of a century from 626 to 539 BC. So while we have dramatic biblical tales of Babylon raising a tower to the heavens and getting the almighty backhand of God for their hubris, on the whole, their downfall is murkier because it happened at several points, but also in none of them. Those Babylonians left a wily historical legacy, but I think we can pin them down. So, to figure out when Babylon fell, how, and why that question is so fascinating, let's do some history.
Yay.
We begin, as we always do in Mesopotamia, with the rivers, because Babylon's rise owes to the shifting course of the Euphrates between roughly 2000 and 1800 BC. It was just some city before the Middle Bronze Age, but when the river moved west, humble little Babylon found itself right on the water and controlling the narrowest point between the Tigris and Euphrates, uniquely well situated along the major trade routes at a time when no single empire ruled Mesopotamia.
You always gotta love it. Trade, the birth of empires. Actually, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? And conquest, but trade, definitely.
The third dynasty of Ur had collapsed around 2000 BC, and in the hazy centuries after, ethnic Amorites settled all along the rivers at places such as Babylon. Around the turn of the 1700s BC, Babylon went big mode during the reign of King Hammurabi, who not only conquered up and down Mesopotamia, but set the new standard for empire in both structure and achievement. Hammurabi went farther than any of his predecessors in centralizing power on himself, leaving less room for outer cities and local administrators to cause trouble, while allowing far stronger coordination between the king and the provinces. Hammurabi also made a conscious effort to model himself as a protector of everyone in the empire, as very pointedly conveyed in the preamble to his famous law code. Babylonian law had precedents from earlier Sumerian works, but the Code of Hammurabi set a true uniform standard of justice across the empire, a categorized list of key laws whose legal precedent could also guide judges to adapt or create new laws that all still fit Hammurabi's vision. The laws themselves are pretty hardcore, with one-to-one retribution as the penalty for most crimes.
What? One-to-one retribution? Some laws. Dismembering every bad surgeon will quickly leave you with no surgeons at all. So maybe the law defined the maximum penalty rather than the default penalty. It's amazing we actually still have the code, but we can't mistake it for a full picture. Yeah.
eye for an eye and all that, but it seems in practice like a calculated off-ramp from the kinds of never-ending blood feuds that make up 90% of world literature by volume. Speaking of, we have Babylon to thank for one of the oldest written stories on Earth, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The original folktales were Sumerian from centuries earlier, and
Yeah, well, it's almost like they planned this. That was the last video I reacted to from them.
mostly focused on the heroic exploits of the great king Gilgamesh, but Babylonian storytellers collated them into one narrative focusing all in on the emotional drama of Gilgamesh losing his best friend Enkidu and embarking on a doomed quest for immortality. The Babylonian version also incorporates the myth of the Great Flood as key backstory, showing a literary tradition that was comfortable combining very disparate sources into one cohesive whole.
Again, what was I saying in the last reaction? Where just the fact that the story of the Great Flood goes that far back, it's absolutely nuts.
Aside from stories of kings, their mathematics were so advanced they were giving the Pythagorean theorem as homework a millennium before Greeks twigged onto the idea, and they even understood contagious disease. A king wrote that if someone's sick, don't hang out with them and don't touch their shirts. The strength of
Duh, I know.
their writing and overall cultural heft made their Akkadian tongue into the diplomatic language of the Near East, and their ideas traveled right along with it. For 150 years after Hammurabi's death, Babylon was the grandest and most accomplished imperial city in the Near East, but here we find their first fall in 1595 BC,
Oh, okay,
as
here
the
we go.
newcomer Hittite Empire from Anatolia swept down the Euphrates, sacked the city and deposed the dynasty, and then just went back home. I mean, you know how these things happen. You get caught up in all the excitement, don't pay complete attention to what you're setting fire to, and only hours later you realize, oh crap, that was Babylon. In the wake of the chaos, the Kassite people from the east swooped in to take the kingdom for themselves as the new ruling dynasty. But tellingly, they didn't change much. Babylon remains the capital, Akkadian stayed the primary language, and later Assyrian conquerors had the same idea that Babylon in itself was valuable, even after the original Babylonians were sacked and deposed. Long before Rome, this may be the first case of a civilization outlasting their own fall through the power of sheer vibes. And
Cool.
I respect that. By the 800s, the Assyrian Empire was the major player, but the biggest change came from ordinary people, as by this point Mesopotamia had a second main language in Aramaic, written with an alphabet that was far easier to learn and use than cuneiform. So when a new dynasty in Babylon asserted its independence from Assyria and sacked their capital in 612, they had created a Neo-Babylonian empire not on the basis of the ethnicity or language of old, but that it was the city of Babylon at the imperial helm again. And from 605 to 562 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar II splashed every ornamentation on his capital to make it worthy of that ancient mantle. According to a very impressed, but certainly exaggerating Herodotus, Babylon was an exact square surrounded by the river, canals, and giant brick walls, with magnificent gates and broad processional roads all framing massive palaces, gardens, and temples, such as at Temenanki, the great six-layer ziggurat
Love the
which
blue.
directly inspired the myth of the Tower of Babel. And for whatever reason, unlike the great ziggurat of Ur with its proportions of squares perfectly inscribed within a triangle, Temenanki just doesn't do it for me on the proportions. Aesthetically, it rules, a phenomenal feat of design
It's
and
very
pure
tall.
height, but the shapes don't click with me, and I really can't articulate why. Proportion is just one of those indescribable things, but architectural diatribes
Yeah.
aside, unlike Herodotus, biblical sources would likely have seen the ziggurat for themselves, as Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Judah resulted in the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and mass deportations of Jews to Babylon. Now, despite the spectacular restoration of Babylonian prestige and power, many of their own citizens were also having some religion issues. King Nabonidus
okay.
was engaged in what various sources describe as religious reform or outright heresy by reorienting the Babylonian pantheon towards the moon god Sin, but the priesthood of their patron god Marduk was deeply unthrilled, and nearby aspiring empires took notice. When the Achaemenid Persian Empire conquered down into Mesopotamia, King Cyrus went to great lengths to paint this as a liberation and a restoration of Marduk to his place atop the pantheon. At first, this narrative seemed familiar. An outside group comes in, retains their religion, language, and core institutions, and continues to rule from Babylon. New management, same company. Babylon falls, but lives another day. But Cyrus didn't do that last part because Babylon was one of 5 capitals, and the only one outside of their homeland in Iran.
One of 5 capitals? I mean, I can understand having like a territorial capital. I mean, we do that today with like state and province capitals being underneath, the nation capital. But having like 5 national capitals? Okay, how does the paperwork on that one work?
Cyrus didn't try to turn Babylon Persian, and he borrowed several aspects of Babylonian society, like Aramaic language and cuneiform writing for fancy occasions, but critically, Persia also borrowed from their new subjects in Media, Assyria, Anatolia, Greece, and Egypt. So Babylon was only one part of this new Achaemenid identity.
Yeah.
Only one capital. Only Babylon. And that is something they could never recover from. When Alexander, who should have stayed sober, toppled the Persians and plans to make Babylon his new imperial capital, he carefully dismantled Atemenanki with the aim of rebuilding it, but died before getting to that crucial second part. So off went the crowning monument of a whole civilization. Sure, he had successors, but none with sympathies to Babylon. His general Seleucus carved out an empire in the Near East, but made a new capital at Seleucia on the Tigris, later known as Ctesiphon, to its Parthian and Sasanian rulers. With its usefulness seemingly outlived, Babylon eroded in the centuries after as people simply left. By the time of the Romans at the turn of the millennium, Babylon was a ghost, slowly sinking back down into the floodplains it first rose out of 1800 years before. Babylon is not a descriptive identity. Amorites had founded the first dynasty, yet the Neo-Babylonians counted several major ethnic groups and spoke a different language. Most other states in the interim had also ruled from the ancient capital, but only this empire earns the name Neo-Babylonian because they put their city back atop the entire Near Eastern world. Not an empire of any one group, but an empire of the city. Gradual change was part of the game, but every new ruler at some level submitted themselves to the mantle of Babylon and took on its ways. Despite sacks and deposed dynasties, Babylon never truly fell because it always had something to teach. Had Alexander, the gone from our empires but not from our hearts, lived and made Babylon his capital, we might be talking about the Greco-Babylonian Empire instead of a Macedonian one, but even still, by his day, the idea of Babylon was no longer so innately compelling that people turned to it alone as the model and meter of civilization. Sure, they borrowed from it, but Babylon became lost amid other influences. Persian, Egyptian, Greek, Judaic, Anatolian, Indian, not the sole beacon of civilization in the Near East, just another of its constituent parts. So when did Babylon fall? When the rest of the ancient world caught up to it. Thank you for watching.
Jeez, okay,
I promised
that's a
far
way
too
of
long
putting
ago
that.
that I would cover Babylonian history.
I mean, that whole thing with the history of Babylon, it kind of, at least in my mind, the whole history of it kind of mirrors the whole thing, the story of Gilgamesh. But with Gilgamesh, he gained immortality, well, a form of immortality through the constant and at this point almost forever retelling of his story. With Babylon, it was powerful and a thing to be looked up to, but the reason it died was people stopped talking about it. It stopped becoming something that was retold and something that was special. It just became another city. And at that point, it just, you know, as he said, crumbled and sank back into the swamps from which it came. I like that. That's some really, so, yeah, that's all I got for now. But yeah, God, I love Overly Sarcastic Productions so much. Original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner tab will lead you to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.